Everyone, happy January. It's going to be for January 13th. We're going to talk a little bit today, just as some basic stuff about sociology, about research methods. It's going to help us just to orient a little bit about what this class is going to be. So this is obviously our first recorded lecture today. So it'll be on the Moodle page. You'll be able to access it that way. If you have any troubles with it, obviously, please coming to me. You might not be hearing this or watching it if you do have those troubles. But of course, you can always reach out with anything to do with that. So how this is going to go is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show some notes. And we're going to talk through some of these topics, and then we will have chances on Fridays, like I've mentioned previously, that we can discuss in person about the things that we've talked about for the week. So let me and forgive me, I'm sort of still recovering from a cold, so I might be clearing my throat a few times. I am going to share my screen right there. Perfect. Not sure if you can see me in the recording, but nonetheless, this is what we're going to go through. And if you have any issues, again, like I said, please reach out. This is for the 13th of January. Just wanted to reemphasize again too, readings for class. So our readings for class will be on the Moodle page. Actually, I will pull that up just so you all can see, of course. Let's go. You can see a lot of stuff here. And there we go. So our spring 2025 page. So you're going to be able to see all of our readings. And actually, this recording is going to be up here in the section for January 13th, that first Monday of class. So all the readings are linked here. If you have any trouble with them, please let me know. Now, just wanted to mention that, of course. And then also just wanted to ask, what is sociology? Because that's what we're here, right? This is Sociology 228. It's research methods and statistics, but it is sociology. So we're going to start with some of those foundations of sociology today. That is what we're going to do. So just to give you an overview of what actually is sociology, sociology is the systematic study of society, of social institutions, and social relationships. In sociology, we seek to understand how human behavior is shaped by social structure, shaped by cultural norms, by collective values. We as sociologists examine the ways in which individuals and groups interact in various social contexts, ranging from small groups and communities to more large-scale social systems and global processes. So whether it's things like the government in general, whether it's globalization or whether it's just in a classroom setting like here, a virtual asynchronous classroom setting like here. Those are the things we're looking at. So the scientific study is the important piece here. Sociology is a science. It is a social science. So we are the scientific study of society, of social relationships, social interactions, of culture. We aim to understand how human behavior and consciousness shape and are shaped by our surrounding cultural and social structures. Our identities, the things that we do every day, how those things are shaped by the world around us, but how we are perceiving and understanding the world around us, but also how the world around us is perceiving and understanding us in different settings. All of those things are what we're looking at in sociology. And so some key elements here to sociology and the study of sociology or the sociological pursuits here. So social institutions. These are the major structures in society. Things like family, education, religion, the economy, government. These things are really large scale components. So we are exploring in sociology, how these institutions are organized, how they function, how they affect individuals and groups, all of the impacts there. There's a lot there. Social relationships as well, we're looking at. So sociologists analyze interactions between individuals and groups, looking at the patterns of behavior, social roles, of relationships. This includes studying concepts like socialization, which we can talk a little bit more about, identity, group dynamics, these things that how we're impacted in society, social inequality as well. So a significant focus in sociology is the study of inequality and stratification. Sociologists investigate how resources, how opportunities and privileges are distributed unequally or inequitably among different groups based on things like class, race, gender, age, sexuality, those sorts of components. We're looking at how there's that that inequality there. Social change. So we're also looking at how societies change over time. This includes studying social movements, technological advancements, demographic shifts, cultural transformations, you name it. Those things that change society, that's one of those things we're really interested in as sociologists. And then, of course, culture. So sociologists explore the beliefs, the values, the norms, the material and immaterial objects that constitute a society's culture. So when you think about what is United States culture, or what is even subcultures within the dominant culture, right? The culture of Concordia College, for instance. What are those things that make up and identify what is a culture? Those are really important foundational components to what sociology is, and we're looking at that day in and day out. So we look at how culture influences behavior, how different cultures shape social interactions differently. I mean, all those different cultural differences, we look at how these are social phenomena. It's not just a biological phenomena that dictates our behavior, or a psychological one. Research methods. They're moving over to the right column. Sociologists use various methods to gather and analyze data about all these things, about social phenomena. These methods include surveys, interviews, ethnography, experiments, content analyses. Research can be qualitative, quantitative, or a combination of both. We're going to get into, obviously, in this class, all of what those are, right? The different methods, but also the different types of data, those sorts of things. Theoretical perspective. So sociology is informed by several real key theoretical perspectives and frameworks that have guided research and analysis. So these are just a couple that I wanted to mention. So including structural functionism. This views society as a complex system with parts working together to promote stability and order. The stability and order there is a key piece, so that society is structured and we all have key functions in that society. Conflict theory focuses on these struggles between different social groups over things like resources and power. Symbolic interactionism, examining how individuals create and interpret meanings through social interaction. So why does a Kaaba ring have any meaning to us? Well, it's based upon socially and our interactions with those sorts of things and how our culture defines them. That's why symbols have meaning. That's why anything has meanings, is that we interpret them as that because of the social interactions around us. Feminist theory, analyzing gender inequalities and the ways in which gender structures social life, and then critical theory. So it critiques social structures, seeks to identify and challenge power dynamics and injustices. For a final project in this class, you might actually be looking into some of these theories. Applied sociology. So this is really where I come from. So I come from the applied sociology background. So I'm an organizational sociologist and community sociologist, but what I focus on is the applied research. So sociologists often apply our findings to address social issues, to inform things like even public policy. So this involves working in fields like social work, education, urban planning, healthcare, criminal justice, using the things that we're going to talk about throughout this class, the things that you would talk about if you were studying sociology outside of this class, and influencing those and infusing those into other areas of study. That's applied sociology. Global perspective. So modern sociology really emphasizes the importance of understanding global interconnectedness as well, and the impact of globalization on even local and international levels. So this includes studying transnational processes, things like migration, global inequality, global exchange, trade policy, the global economic systems, all those sorts of things we're studying in sociology. So just in sum here, sociology provides really valuable insights into the functioning of societies and the behavior of individuals within those societies. So we help to explain social phenomena, identify key patterns and trends, offer solutions even to social problems. So we look at the intricate connections there between individuals, their social environments. Sociology is meant to contribute to a deeper understanding of the human experience. That's what the humanities are looking at, right? So sociology looks at that broader perspective. Sociological imagination now. Does anyone know what the sociological imagination is. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. That's okay. Either way, we're going to talk about it. So the sociological imagination was a term coined by C. Wright Mills, and we'll talk about C. Wright Mills throughout this course, especially if you take Social 111 too, or sociological theory. We'll talk about him a lot. He actually wrote a book in 1959, The Sociological Imagination. So it refers to the ability to understand the intricate relationship between individual experiences and broader societal patterns. It involves recognizing how personal challenges are not merely personal, but often rooted in larger social, economic, and historical contexts. So the sociological imagination requires people to think themselves away, essentially. Think yourself away from the familiar routines of daily life in order to understand the larger meaning behind their experiences. So the sociological imagination is really the application of this sort of imaginative thought to the asking and answering of sociological questions. So you think about a personal experience that you have, and the sociological imagination that you have and will continue to foster throughout this course is going to allow you to take yourself out of yourself, of the individual experience, and look at what's the collective or the structural framework or the historical context of what I'm experiencing. Think of like homelessness. What are the more structural context and applications of homelessness beyond, well, this person doesn't have a job, or maybe they can't find a job, or beyond just individual life choices? Go deeper than that. Go deeper into the economic hardships, or maybe the structural components of what contributes to homelessness in a society. Some key elements here of the sociological imagination. So this includes understanding personal troubles, public issues. So Mills, what he did is argued that many personal troubles, like unemployment even, or divorce, or homelessness, are actually public issues influenced by societal structures. So for instance, like an individual losing a job may be a personal trouble, but widespread unemployment is a public issue that reflects deeper economic conditions and policies. Number two, connecting biography and history. The sociological imagination helps individuals see the connection between their own life, the biography, if you will, and the larger historical context, allowing people to understand how our personal experiences are actually shaped by historical events and social forces around us. And then three, critical thinking. This is key. So encouraging critical thinking about the world. Instead of just accepting things at face value, those with a sociological imagination questions why things are the way that they are and consider alternative explanations and solutions. And then number four piece as well, empathy and understanding. Developing a sociological imagination helps to foster empathy and understanding by helping individuals appreciate the diversity of experiences and perspectives within a society, of all the different things that people experience, and understanding and having empathy and context for the world around us. So consider the issue of obesity. A person with a sociological imagination would look beyond individual choices and consider factors such as food deserts, advertisings, cultural attitudes towards food, economic inequality, public health policies, all these things that contribute to the prevalence of obesity in a society. In essence, the sociological imagination empowers individuals, empowers us all together here to see the link between our personal lives and larger social forces. And that enables us to do the same thing about other folks, right? So if we can connect our experience to that, how can we look at others' experience and do the same thing? That's where that key empathy and understanding pieces come in. Now, social research. So what do we mean by social research? So our knowledge of the social world is limited to our immediate and limited life experience. So we need an empirical framework to better and more accurately and effectively understand our world, understand society and groups. So what does this encompass? The social world, it details so much, right? What is the social world? Society, culture, politics, organizations, schools, teams, classes. Can you think about all the things that fall under that? I mean, think about that. I mean, everything in life falls under those, almost nearly everything in life falls under those things. So when we think about social research, it is critical and it's really, really important. So from the macro to the micro, macro being your high level sort of studies of global phenomenon or society in general, to the micro of understanding lived experiences, individual lived experiences. It's the plethora of those things. And, subjective and objective knowledge, I think it's really important to cover what we mean by this. So subjective knowledge is knowledge that's based purely on the opinions of the individual, reflecting someone's values and biases, your point of view, but objective on the other hand. And this is the thing that we're looking for in social research and in this class. Objective knowledge is knowledge which is free of the biases, opinions, and values of the researcher. It reflects what is really out there, right? What is really happening in the social world. And the only way that we can get to objective knowledge, which is so important for the decisions we make, public policy, whatever it might be, the way that we get to objective knowledge is through sound research design. So if you're sitting here wondering, why am I taking a class on research methods? That's why, because the better we understand research methods, the better we can obtain better data, better knowledge, and we can make a difference in the world. That's the point here of social research. And so what is research design? Research design itself is the framework for how you complete a study, right? The framework for a research project or study. So the framework of methods and techniques used by a researcher to conduct a study. And what research design does is it allows us to sharpen the research methods suitable for the subject matter and set up their studies for success. So research design is a strategy for answering your question, answering your research question using empirical data. So creating a research design means making decisions about your overall research objective and approach, whether you'll rely on primary research or secondary research. How are you going to go about answering the questions you have, your research questions? So whether that's quantitative data or qualitative data, if you're going to do a case study or run an experiment or whatever it might be, that's all in your research design. So much of this class, that's why it's called research methods and statistics, is that is not all just focused on statistics, which I know all of you are very excited about. It's that we're focused on the methodology as well. That's really, really critical. And sound research design is important. And so when we think about sound research design, there are 5 kind of key steps here that I wanted to emphasize. One is identifying the research problem clearly and justifying why you've selected it, justifying why it's an important problem to look into. Number 2, reviewing previously published literature associated with the problem area. So what have other folks done, right? What have other folks looked at in this area? What do we already know? How is this study? How is your research adding something new or solidifying certain pieces of this area? 3, clearly and explicitly specify hypotheses. So think about your research questions, right? You need to specify your research questions so you know what your hypotheses are, the hypotheses that are central to the problem selected. We'll dive into actually all these individual key terms more and more as the semester goes on. 4, effectively describe the data, which will be necessary for an adequate test of the hypotheses and explain how such data will be obtained. So you got to be able to effectively describe the data if you're going to actually test it and explain it. And then finally, describe the methods of analysis which will be applied to the data in determining whether or not the hypotheses are true or false. So you got to make sure you understand the methods and you can explain what methods that you are actually applying. Action-oriented research design. So before we get into the different types of research design, which we will on the coming slide, I think it's really, really important to also talk about this action-oriented research design. This is in the heart of applied social research. So this is where you identify a problem, but you're intervening in those problems. So you're testing interventions that are implemented for that problem. You're assessing those interventions, and then you're repeating that process. So organizational consulting and development, really relevant here, right? When we think about implementing new solutions to a problem, that's in assessing it, right? The assessing part comes in with applied social research. You can implement these research tools we're going to talk about in this class in so many different ways, and this is one of them. If you're trying to fix a problem, you're going to need data to assess whether you're actually fixing the problem or where you need to maybe do something different in your approach. So I just like to highlight that we're focused on action here. When we talk about research, we're not talking about just data for the sake of data. We're going to do something with that data. I want you to make sure that that's an important piece as you think about this course. Types of research design. So there are various types. You see a lot of them listed here, and so we'll go through them relatively quickly. But there's more in the reading too to be aware. But these are some of the main types I want you to be thinking about. So case study. This is more your in-depth analysis of a single case, a single event, or a single individual, providing really rich, detailed insights. Really useful for generating hypotheses, for studying rare or unique phenomena. But there's also some limitations too. So limited generalizability, potential researcher bias. It's more time intensive, perhaps. So that's what we're thinking about a case study. What we mean by that. Now, descriptive research, focusing on describing characteristics or phenomena as they currently exist. So providing a snapshot of a current state. Really good for a foundation of future research, can cover large populations, large areas, but again, you can't determine causality here. Really limited in your analytical depth and a risk of oversimplification. Exploratory research, this is where you're investigating new or maybe poorly understood phenomena to generate ideas or hypotheses. So some strengths here: it's flexible, adaptable, lays groundwork for future studies, encourages creativity in research design, but your limitations, limited by a lack of structure or rigor, cannot establish causality or detailed conclusions. Results are often not generalizable. Those are the things you got to consider for exploratory research. Now, comparative research, this is where you're literally comparing two or more groups, maybe systems or cases, to identify similarities and differences. So highlighting context-specific factors, useful for cross-cultural or policy studies, broadening our understanding of phenomena, but also limitations, requires equivalent measures across groups, can be complex and resource intensive as well. I'll actually cross-sectional, longitudinal, I'll devote the next slide to those specific pieces here. So we're going to skip over just for a second. Correlational research, examining the relationship between two or more variables without manipulating them. So identifying patterns throughout those relationships, useful when experimentation is not possible. Provides a basis for further research, but you're limited in that you cannot really establish that causation. I'm sure you've heard this before, but I want to highlight again, correlation does not equal causation. We'll get a little bit more into that again in coming weeks. Experimental research, so manipulating one variable, your independent variable, to observe changes in another dependent variable under controlled conditions. So you can really, a stronger ability to infer causality here, high control over the study and the experiment, and it's reproducible under similar conditions. Now, these artificial settings can maybe lack sort of external validity. Ethical concerns can limit it, can come up in the limited scope of experiments, and often expensive and time intensive. And all those key concepts I just kind of mentioned, right? Causality, independent, dependent variables, ethical concerns, validity and reliability. All those things we'll get into. So don't worry if you're like, what did he just say? I promise that'll make sense in the coming days. Quasi-experimental research. So similar to experimental research, but lacks random assignment of participants. That's really the main difference there. So a little bit weaker in its causality. Meta-analysis, that's where we're combining and analyzing data from multiple studies to draw more overarching conclusions. So increasing statistical power, you're pooling data together to summarize a larger body of research to identify patterns and gaps across studies. Now, quality really depends on the included studies, right? So if the other studies, the data wasn't very good, then your meta-analysis is not going to have great data. It can be really time-consuming as well. Ethnographic research. This is an in-depth, more qualitative research method design that involves observing and interviewing participants in their natural setting. So providing really deep contextual understanding, captures cultural and social nuances, flexible and adaptable in this approach. And we'll talk about some of the limitations, actually, how it's so time-intensive and prolonged engagement, subject to a lot of researcher bias, not a lot of generalizability. And we're actually going to talk about an example in the coming few days here of an ethnography in our ethics day with Alice Goffman. So just be prepped for that. We'll talk a little bit more about ethnography. Finally, grounded theory. So a more qualitative approach focused on generalizing or generating theories rather from data collected during the research process. So it's good for developing theories. It's flexible, adapted to new findings, useful in understudied areas as well, but also the limitations, really time intensive and labor intensive, requiring substantial analytical expertise, things like that. So that was a high level, very quick over the types of research design, but I want you to be able to come back to this, and I can post these slides as well, of course. And so you can just see the different types of research design that we may think about, that you may think about, especially in final projects and whatnot. Cross-sectional versus longitudinal research. So it's essentially just the difference in when and how a study is being done. So longitudinal study, think long term, longitudinal. And cross-sectional studies are two different types of research design. So cross-sectional studies, you collect data from a population at a specific point in time. It's like if I studied this class right now and wrote an article about it. In a longitudinal study, again, think long term, you repeatedly collect data from the same sample over an extended period of time. So that'd be, let's say if I conducted surveys with this class every week throughout the semester, and we looked at differences in that data across a long period of time. People have done longitudinal studies over years, generational studies, where you take a cohort of individuals, maybe 20 people or 100 people, and you're studying them every 10 years of their lives. And so you can see the differences in how they developed. So a couple strengths and limitations. So cross-sectional can be really efficient, requires fewer resources compared to longitudinal studies, offers a more broad snapshot, but causality issues. And there's some maybe temporal ambiguity as well, where it's hard to determine whether changes in one variable precede changes in another. Whereas longitudinal, again, you can track those changes over time, really rich amount of data and individual level. You can look at the analysis of how individuals evolve across time. Now, limitations, much more time consuming, right? And so there's also a risk of participants dropping out that can affect things like validity. So both designs have their place depending on your research question. But again, we would decide about what are the answers I'm trying to figure out, what are the population I'm trying to study. Those are the things that you'll figure out throughout this process. And this cross-sectional longitudinal are going to be kind of a broader question when you're deciding those things. Primary versus secondary research. So primary is your original firsthand. You're the author of the source generated the research data that you're actually using. So that's when you yourself are collecting the information. Let's say you conduct a survey on individuals, or you interview 30 people, or do a focus group. That's your primary research that you yourself have actually conducted. Secondary research, on the other hand, this is when an author of the source that you're using gathers existing data, usually produced by someone else. So when they then report, analyze, and then interpret that other person's data. So let's say you did a survey, and then 6 months later, I looked at your data and ran some different analyses on it, or looked at it in a different way. That's secondary research. Academic research is oftentimes a synthesis of the two. So secondary, you're establishing maybe a current state in research and understanding on an issue, like literature reviews, that sort of thing. Primary research, really to build upon that existing work, or solidify yourself, or study as part of in the zeitgeist, in this field now. So both have their place and often mixed together. Quantitative versus qualitative research. I'm going to go over this pretty quickly, just because we're going to actually have the coming days diving into each, and actually the whole course dives into each separately. But think of quantitative, think of numerical data. So this is the analysis of numerical data, really to test hypotheses or identify larger patterns. But think quantitative, think of numerical data. That's where that statistics piece, the kind of basic sort of mathematics and statistics piece that we'll talk about, that's where that comes in. Whereas qualitative, focusing on understanding social phenomena through non-numerical data. Think of interviews, observations, or even text analysis or content analysis. Those things, like me, if I had a conversation with you, that would be more qualitative. Or if I conducted a survey and we did various survey questions, or let's say I rank your satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 10 with this course, that's more quantitative. And so there are different strengths and limitations to each, right? So strengths of quantitative, larger populations, reducing researcher bias, more standardization, comparability, precision, that's all the things about stats that make them so important. But limitations, the things that qualitative research has, like context, looking into deeper meanings, nuances, may not fully capture the dynamics and emergent social processes of certain areas. And then qualitative research, again, the strength, more rich detail, right? In a conversation, I can dive into specific elements of that conversation, and dive into maybe something interesting that you brought up more than you can through a survey. But again, not generalizable. More subjectivity, more time intensive, harder to replicate those sorts of studies. And then mixed methods research, all that you need to think about here is the mix of the two. So it's where you integrate both qualitative and quantitative data into a single study. And this is my bread and butter. This is what I love, okay? I think whether you're doing consulting or whether you're doing an analysis on maybe a program you're implementing, mixed method research often gives you the most comprehensive view by combining these things. So strengthens findings through a process we call triangulation. Again, we'll talk more about that later. But where you're focusing on and really essentially creating more reliability of your research findings and validity by having different sets of data. But it's more time consuming, more research or resource intensive by combining these methods. It's more complex to design and integrate these findings. But again, it's going to give you more of a rich and holistic understanding typically. Research papers and articles. All I wanted to mention here is that now that we've talked about methods, and as we continue to, when you're doing research for this course or for other courses, dive into that method sections more. So think about, okay, what methods are they actually using? And then throughout this course, especially by we get to the end of it, the skills I want you to be able to understand, that you take away from this course, is that you can assess what's a good research design and what's not. So you can understand, okay, is this good data that these people are using? Is this a good article to understand, or is it not? Because that's really, really important in this world. And we need to make sure that we can assess what's a good study and what's not. And then just a quick takeaway, it's good to understand information we disagree with too, right? Now we think of subjective and objective going back to the first couple slides, but whether it's in academics as researchers, when we have an idea or we have a value point, and then we see data that we disagree with, what does that mean for us? What do we do with that? Our knowledge of methods, and this is the same with general life too, right? There's a lot of things on social media you probably disagree with. There are things that come up that we constantly disagree with. But our knowledge of research methodology, of these methods, allows us to be better digesters, consumers, and even more importantly, better investigators and critics of information that comes to us. So just use that sociological imagination. We don't just accept things at face value. By understanding research methodology, we can dive into these things and be more critical of the information that's in front of us. And that makes us more well-rounded as a society, as researchers, as students, as individuals, all of that. We're in the information age, so this is really important and really, really needed. All right, last thing that I wanted to mention is just make sure you get SPSS set up on your computer. That's really your first assignment. Reach out to Concordia's IT department. And let them know, and email Carrie Dreyer if necessary. But you need to get SPSS downloaded and working up on your computer. Concordia will set that up for you. I will email Concordia as well with a list of everyone here that needs SPSS set up, but you need to make sure it's downloaded, and Concordia will give you the directions to download it. And if you have any questions, please let me know. All right, everybody. That's all we got for Monday the 13th. So hope y'all enjoyed learning a little bit more about just the foundations of sociology here. But please reach out to me with any questions you have, and of course, monitor the Moodle page. Thanks, everyone.